no peace! No justice, no peace! For us, we need to demand the following. One, immediate, unconditional lifting of the siege on Gaza. Let me repeat, immediate, unconditional lifting of the siege on Gaza, because that is what international law requires. Second, we need to hold Israel accountable in the International Criminal Court. Netanyahu is a criminal committed war crimes. We need to take Israel to the International Criminal Court. Third, we need the implementation of the 4 Geneva Conventions. Palestinians should be protected, not demonized.
Well, let me introduce you to the people who don't know what we're talking about. And, we have here Faisal Khan, is a Justice Peace, the founder of Carolina Peace Center, board member of ACLU, which is a social justice organization, an advocate organization. Before we delve into that rally in Washington, D.C., tell us a little bit about yourself. How, your background and your connection with justice. And, I've seen you involved with the Black Lives Matter before the savage attack on Gaza. So tell us a little bit about your background and what is driving this to you personally.
But first of all, thank you so much for giving the opportunity to discuss about important issues. I really appreciate. Well, initially, I think I grew up in a household. My parents were very well traveled. My father especially was a big global traveler, and I never at home had any discussions about hate or anger about anybody. It was mostly about the plight of people and always trying to give and give. But I think I just had this fire inside my belly that I could not just sit quiet and see if there was an atrocities or injustice taking place. Even in my neighborhood or my school, I had to say something. And maybe you can call it divine light, or maybe God somehow put me on that path. I don't know. But, I somehow, my conscience just did not allow me to remain silent. So I start, my educational tool really comes from traveling as well. Following my father's footsteps. I've traveled across the world, of course, the Middle East and parts of Asia and Africa and Egypt. My father was a big admirer of the Egyptian history and the country as well. And I remember him going to Beirut in his suit and tie. Unlike nowadays, people go in jeans, very dressed and well-mannered. So I learned a lot about learning about other cultures, about other customs, about other religions, and even people that are not religious faith, and to be tolerant and to be respectful. And I learned a lot about myself within being in those realms, in different mediums and different areas. Coming into this country, spending time also.
What was home before coming to this country?
My dad actually worked in Saudi Arabia, in the 1950s. My family originally comes from India, and because partition, they had to move to Pakistan for a very short time, although I did never live there, and I've never lived there too. So my dad arrived in Saudi Arabia because he spoke English well. He was well educated, and shorthand writing was a big thing at that time, typing, so all those things. He had all those wonderful attributes, and he was very well talented man, well versed, well educated. So he ended up moving to Saudi Arabia in the 1950s. And then I came here in the US when I was a teenager, 14 and a half years old. And, I've had wonderful experience from people from all different backgrounds and colors and ethnicities and faiths. And I was blessed to sit down with people from all corners, coming from different areas of background. And that really educated me a lot. It made me learn a lot about myself, who I am in this world. And, and as I spend a lot of time in certain communities, especially Black communities in this country, I firsthand realized how the systemic institutionalized racism, the structured, how it was well designed to marginalize them and to keep them away from a mainstream quality life in America. Spending time across the projects and having friends from the projects, whether it's DC or South Miami or in Hartford, in other parts of the country, I realized how police was behaving with the Black communities juxtaposed to white communities, and the disparity of poverty and income and the quality of life. So, as time progressed, I got more and more involved. And after 9/11, it really, Muslim Americans really were under the microscope, under scrutiny. People were being harassed in the airplanes, in the airports, people being questioned by the FBI, children at school. There was just a lot of fear, although a lot of good Americans came out too to support, a lot of elected officials came out in support as well. So that really changed a lot for me, to push me to get more into interfaith dialogue. But even at a certain point in interfaith dialogue, where I'm sitting with the Jewish communities or Christian communities, we shared a lot about similarities, but I felt that there was a component of justice missing in those discussions. And to me, I think in the Quran, God is saying that being just is being God conscious. I can't remember which chapter that is. And I think in all religions, God is asking to be just, to stand up for justice, to speak out, to help the ones that are being marginalized or are victim of oppression. So I think that part of the discussion, and then I realized that there was more work need to be done. And then I started, advocating for more of these communities, marginalized communities that are at risk. And I started my organization as well. Basically from that point on, I think that, more and more work came to me, and I got more and more involved, and I've been very honored and blessed to speak at different faith communities. I've sat down with Jewish community. I've gone to synagogues. I've, broken bread with them, and I've talked about similarities between Islam and Judaism and Christianity. I've gone to churches. So, it's at times, it's challenging sometimes to bring up some issues that are very hot topic, like Palestine and Israel. But I think the number one thing that I learned was making connections with people. The connection was really important, to have an understanding. Not necessarily means that people are going to be agreeing with you everything. It's just the fact that you have that connection with people, whether they agree with you or not. I have realized that all I can do is all my work, and I advocate to do work peacefully, lawfully, non-violently. But we need to stand up. We can't remain silent. We can't stay quiet. We can't just not worry about things, because if it doesn't affect us, it's definitely going to affect our children. Not only children here in the United States, but children abroad. And that's, as we saw in Gaza, how 67 children were brutally killed by Israeli bombardment, supported by the United States, and Joe Biden, who I supported, who I voted for, I advocated for him, it was disappointing. And again, criticizing an elected official doesn't mean that you hate the country or you hate the official. That's our job as the constituents. These public servants, these elected officials are called public servants for a reason. They're here to serve the American public. And we choose them, we elect them, so it's our job to hold them accountable. And I think that's where there's a lot of complacency in the American public, where they seem to be, very scared and reluctant to criticize their own elected officials, and it's our job to hold them accountable and make sure that they do their job well, and to uphold the principles and laws of human rights and Constitution.
What a concept. Tell us a little bit about the rally, the March for Palestine. I mean, were you surprised by the number, and who were there?
I wasn't surprised at all. We were actually expecting a much larger crowd. Incidentally, it was a Memorial Day weekend, a long weekend. So a lot of people either go out of town, and because of COVID restrictions have been relaxed. A lot of people, went to visit their families and went to the beaches or the mountains. The weather was like in the low 50s. It was raining off and on. And so we had about, we documented 35,000 people, but in my estimate, I think it was around mid 40s, 40, 45, 46,000 people. We were actually expecting a lot bigger crowd, but because of the weather, it restricted that. However, there were people coming in and out. There were a lot of families. I mean, I met people coming from Texas, people coming from Kansas, people coming from all over the country. We had 45 buses coming from New York City, just from New York City. So 8 buses altogether. This was a endorsement of this event, a coalition of about over 125 organizations across the United States. It was a very well organized event. We had about over 20 speakers, well-known speakers. And, it was interesting when I was documenting, and I've made some videos and talking to people, it was really sort of a celebration of life and humanity, basically at the same time, you know, and also it was amplifying the voices of Palestinians, you know, right at the Lincoln Memorial. It was symbolic, you know, like the Lincoln Memorial is very symbolic to civil rights movement, and Martin Luther King, I Have a Dream, made a speech there, you know, and Abraham Lincoln statue really looking out at the Washington Monument in the Capitol. So it's very symbolic to hold the event there. It was a great turnout. And like I said, I think it was around 35. It's official numbers at 35, but I think it was around 45, 46,000 people, families and children. People were, you know, even though the event was going on, there were other small rallies within that big rally. People were holding and chanting, you know, Free Palestine, and, you know, and also, so I think there was a strong energy about the hurt and the pain, to see the devastation that people had seen, and also to really amplify the voices of the voiceless, you know. And then after the march, people marched on the Constitution, and then half the crowd left and other half went in front of the White House to protest. The event was peaceful. And the good thing that I really was very happy about is that there was no hateful signs, and there was no anti-Semitic gestures, nothing of that nature. It was, you know, there were people from all faiths. I saw people, there were Muslims, there were Christians, and there were Jews. So I saw a lot of Jewish people there as well.
You talked about how the Black Lives Matter movement, and it's not just after George Floyd slaughtered by a police officer, but the relationship between civil rights movement and the Palestinian started even during Martin Luther King, but also it was always muted or kind of careful of associated themselves of the human rights issue on Palestine. Do you think it's different now for the Black Lives Matter and civil rights movement now to have the bold statement about supporting the Palestinian and labeling what happening as ethnic cleansing or you know, apartheid state? Do you see any sign of that?
I do, you know, so I want to go back a little. I think that I have addressed this, and I, you know, had a similar interview next day after the Washington rally and protest. And one of the things I have addressed is that until we don't dismantle the institutionalized racism, the structural racism in this country, you know, until we don't acknowledge our past and history, until we don't realize that there is real problems with how we treat Black African American communities, you know, we're not going to be able to fix anything in this country, including abroad. So what happened is that George Floyd, unfortunately, our brother George Floyd, who was brutally killed, that prompted a mass rally protest in this country. And the country was already at a tip of boiling point with Trumpism and his hate and his bigotry and his divisive tactics and his really racist remarks that he has made, you know. So that was the tipping point. Now, George Floyd is nothing new. This country has been enduring and experiencing brutality, lynching, you know, incarceration, marginalization, you know, gentrification, discrimination at different areas, institutions. So what happened is that now, because we have social media, we have access to information technology, you know, now it's being telecast, and now it's being seen. As if you remember really well, in 1992, Rodney King, you know, in Los Angeles, he was brutally killed on this public street, you know, with, I don't know how many police officers, 8 or 10 police officers brutally beating him up. And that was the first time that incident was recorded by somebody, you know, in a video camera. And as you know, what happened, and then there were LA riots right after that when the verdict came out. So, you know, it's been happening for decades and decades and decades. We see what happened in the 50s, where Black communities were completely separated from the white communities. They could not travel in the same bus, in a bathroom. So the civil rights movement came into play early on. You know, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and there's so many, John Lewis, there's so many wonderful people. African-American women really played a pivotal role in that. They don't get enough recognition. They really organized in the civil rights rallies in New York in early 1900s. You know, people really need to study history. And the problem is that in this country, you know, somebody messaged me yesterday because this weekend has been the Tulsa massacre anniversary, where a Black community was ravaged by these white supremacist mobs. And it was a thriving economy there. The community was doing really well financially. And the same thing here in Wilmington, our neck of the woods in North Carolina too, that also there was an incident, a situation where thriving Black communities were attacked by white mobs. She said something interesting to me. She said, I never knew about this. She said, how can I not know about this? I should have known about it. The white lady, and very supportive of marginalized communities and, other communities. And I said, it's not your fault, because the educational system, the entertainment industry, the way things are set up in our narrative in the media, hides that. So it's not your fault that you did not know. But now, because we have other channels like Netflix, and there's so many documentaries, or independent channels, and now the social media as well, and shows like that, the one you're doing, they're so important now to put light in that issue, and to really understand. In order to really fix our racism, we need to learn our history, and acknowledge that. We can't change the past, but we can definitely change now. And as you know, President Biden, who of course I've been very critical of his policy in terms to the Palestinians, yesterday he was in Tulsa to pay tribute to those communities and respect, and to finally acknowledge as a U.S. president. So things are shifting. After George Floyd, the Black Lives Matter movement was already in the motion, and then of course George Floyd horrible incident tipped everything. We are currently actually focusing another issue like that in Elizabeth City, where Brother Andrew Brown was killed, and in an executed style. We held a press conference yesterday. So the police brutality is really real in this country. I'm not saying all police officers are bad, but there is a system, institutionalized system, of how they treat Black men and women. How they're suspects before they even have done anything already because of their color. So that needs to change. I think what has happened is that because of all this exposure to racism, structured, institutionalized racism, George Floyd's protests, it really provoked people that were not willing or interested in racism for them to look into this much deeper in their own selves, but also as a country, what do we have become? And I think that that movement prompted people now to focus more on Palestinian issue too, because they're also going through similar issues like the ethnic cleansing, apartheid, being separated, just like Black communities were separated from white before the civil rights movement took place. So there are many similarities, and also the fact that now that we have seen some photos come out where Israeli IDF soldiers have their knee on some of the on their neck, and people have posted that. I have not posted it, but I've seen people post that with George Floyd on one side and then a Palestinian man, on the other side of the soldier, very similar. And that's what it has been addressed now, is that what we're seeing here is seeing there. And it's now people are starting to relate that, understand better, how this is so similar in so many ways, and we had a few years ago, we were trying to, in Durham, there's a small city of Durham here in close to Raleigh, where the Durham Police Department wanted to collaborate with IDF, and there was a concerted effort here to make sure that collaboration doesn't go through. It didn't, because of people spoke in the city council and they voted against that. I think that we need to understand that a lot of things that are happening there are affecting here. Our tax dollars, are going to weapons to Israel. Joe Biden just approved another $750 million sale, bypassing the Congress. This is my tax dollars and American tax dollars. So I'm not saying not to support Israel. That's fine. As a country, you have a very policy, but not the expense of deaths of the 67 children and so many innocent lives. Your schools being bombed, hospitals being bombed, homes being bombed. The Masjid al-Aqsa, which is the most third sacred, holiest place for the Muslims in Ramadan, Israeli soldiers storming in, and attacking people and creating so much chaos in Ramadan. And they do this every 2 years, every 2-3 years in Ramadan. They do that. They know it's a very sensitive time for Muslims. It's a very quiet time for Muslims, a time for meditation, time for reflection, time for prayers. And they do that. And American government knows that as well. So coming back to that, I think that now we're coming to that circle now where people are able to connect that better, understand. I mean, we're seeing a lot of congressional leaders speaking out now. It's unprecedented. We never saw that before. We have many progressive leaders coming out and speaking out against that. not against Israel, but in the fact that against Israeli policies, against brutality and marginalization and this apartheid policy that are really destroying Palestinian lives, their right to exist in peace and dignity, and their rights to have their own land. This is a indigenous nation. This is not some bunch of people just traveling in a camel and came by Palestine. I mean, these people have been living there for a long, long time. So I think people are able to relate better now. Yes, due to Black Lives Movement, and it's absolutely important, not only because of Palestine, but Black people, Black communities deserve to live in dignity and respect as well, in this country. And they've been subject to horrible racist policies for centuries, not just recently George Floyd. You go back hundreds of years, and how the lynching took place, the Klan, and you see how different this is, where the Republicans blocked a bipartisan commission to investigate, a commission on this Capitol Hill attacks, on January 6th, Capitol attacks. They blocked that. So I don't even know if you can consider the Republican Party a political party now. It's becoming a cult, really is. And people are understanding that, realizing that, and they wanted a very similar, like a 9/11 commission to investigate, because that was really attack to our democracy and the values that are enshrined in our democratic systems. There is that discussion, there is that shift taking place. And I'm sure, I can't say this for sure, but I'm sure that there's a lot of discussions within their own faith community as well. What are we doing? I mean, this is not who we are. This is not what Torah teaches us, or Quran, people within the Muslim community. Even after 9/11, for example, there was a lot of interfaith discussions, and that prompted to have much more wider conversations, within the Muslim community. And I think it's starting to take place that within the Jewish community as well, and I urge and I implore everybody to continue to stay engaged with each other. This is not about hating somebody from a certain faith. This is about really policies of a nation that has just become apartheid. I mean, this is not just one individual or one country. This is a global condemnation. And as you mentioned earlier, these are massive rallies taking place in the last 2 weeks, in London, in different parts of Europe, and even in some parts of Africa and Asia and Pakistan. There was mass rallies in the United States, throughout the United States, in all cities and towns. People are speaking out. Elected officials in the United States are speaking out. So I think that had prompted that people are realizing that, so I know that there's some narrative taking place in this country where they're saying there's a lot of anti-hate, anti-Israel policies going on. That's not being anti-Israel, anti-hate. This is about crimes against humanity. This is about a crime. If you have a neighborhood and somebody's house being attacked, police comes and investigates, they document everything. And this is the same way in a much larger scale. There's a crime taking place. A nation is violating people's right to exist, taking their land away, taking their rights away. And this is a crime. So let's focus on the crime rather than making it. But unfortunately, I believe there are institutions that are attacking. Their, AIPAC is a big Israeli lobby. They call Ilhan Omar anti-Semitic and all that. She's not. She has spoken out, and she may have worded things wrong. But her focus has been again on human rights. Rashida Tlaib has been very outspoken, and another Muslim speaker, and Representative Newman, McCollum, they're all speaking out. This is not, criticizing Israel's policy is not anti-Semitic. Criticizing Saudi Arabia's policy is not being anti-Muslim. Criticizing UAE policies is not anti-Muslim. These are regimes and government policies. Now, whether people support or not, that's unfortunate if they do. But we need to call it out what it is. We can't just use that. So, like I said, yes, there are certain institutions in this country that try to fabricate the truth and manipulate and twist things around and make it look as if this is anti-Semitic or it's anti-Israel. That's not, absolutely not. And I have personally a lot of Jewish friends. I have friends that have visited Israel, and they're very good people. They're very, not happy what's going on. So I think for certain institutions, but I think, again, I think the truth has its own beauty. The truth always prevails. It has its own shining light. It doesn't need to be protected. It has its own power. And I think more and more people are starting to witness that, what is taking place. And I think that what happened prompted in democracy in this country, and to have your rights not violated, then make sure that your tax dollars and your silence is not contributing to violation of human rights abroad. And thank you very much for the time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. What a way to end this. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of the day. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam, sir. Thank you so much.
Keep your head held high and walk beside us. Don't be shaken by intimidation. We will never stop until liberation and self-determination. Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
وقفوني على